Okay. We've been addressing the three main questions. I will start with the first one. How can communication contribute to TA increasing its impact? We had a number of discussions, and our starting point was basically that we need to think of a good message. But before having the good message, there is the first step, which is we need to build a story, and that was stressed yesterday in the presentations, that you need to know, even if you have some results out of a project, you need to take the best of these results in order to build a story that you can convey to the outside world, as it were. So you need to build a story, and of course you have some criteria that I will discuss afterwards, but at the level of the message, the criteria are, for instance, that you need to bring something new to the debate. You need to be clear to the audience as well, and that relates to the language, to the common language that you will have to find, the appropriate language in order to reach your target groups. And actually the message and the good message that you want to deliver will very much depend on the target groups that relate to your project. So that can be general public, that can be the policymakers, stakeholders, civil society, and so on and so forth. So of course, most often you will not only have one target group, but you will have at least a couple of target groups, and that will affect also the message or the messages that you will want to build and communicate about. So you have all sort of arrows here. Target groups, they are interlinked with the goals that you have, the goals about the communication strategy that you want to develop. So what do you want to achieve? Basically, you want to have an impact. So communication is a tool to have an impact, but you also have a sort of bottom line, meaning that you have a sort of minimum impact that you want to have. So when will, in other words, that's the question, when will it be successful in terms of communication and impact? So that's really a sort of bottom line that evolves according to from one project to another. And when is it a huge success? So I had an impact, for instance, we discussed a range of impacts yesterday, so I will not enter into this now. So the good message, target groups, and the goals that are heavily interrelated. And then of course the context is very important. The context of the problematic here, for instance, if you are addressing a topic which is controversial, like not NGOs, that can be a controversial topic too, but GMOs was and still is very controversial in many countries. So that affects also the way that you will communicate, and the way you will try to tap into the political debates, the social debates, and the media debates. So the context matters in setting the goals, thinking about the message that you want or you can convey, and of course you have to be responsive to that context. It's not about being in the sort of A points and then thinking about what you want to achieve, but then in between, of course, this will not happen the way you thought it was going to happen. So you will have to adapt accordingly in terms of communicating as well. So that was the first question. The second is, what are the features of a good TA communication strategy? And we listed a number of things that are not all listed here. You need to go for diversity. You need to have various tools to communicate. Of course, a website, but you can also rely on social networks. You can do press release. You can do videos. A number of tools can be integrated into your communication toolbox. So, and of course they also depend on the target groups I just talked about. We stressed that it was very important to have professionals dealing with communication issues, and actually most of us don't have a lot of resources in this respect. So the worst situation, as in our case, for instance, we don't have anybody dealing with communication. So it's more like we are a sort of group of bricolers trying to do some stuff and to think about communication often when the project ended, which is not the best thing to do, as we've learned yesterday. So that professionals are very important also because they can help you in building a good message and finding a story where there is one, actually. So of course that relates to resources, and I will come back to this in a minute with the challenges. But I mean, professionals basically, they know all the little tricks. That was what we stressed. You need to mind the package, so the message is important, the content, but also the package. And the package, you can also relate it to the diversity of tools you may want to use. So that can include, the package can include visual images. You can make use of humor, for instance, on an academic style or terms who will speak to your audience and to your target groups. You can be polemical, but of course be careful, and I will come back to that in the challenges. So challenges, that's the third questions. What are the challenges and difficulties of TA communication? Resources are a challenge. I've briefly discussed it with a professional. Sometimes we just don't have money to hire someone who will work full-time on communication. Professionalization. You need to really dedicate. You need to have a background in communication. You need to have specific training in communication, and also the evolving tools, like communication evolves rapidly, and actually. The dynamics of communication evolves, and we will discuss that afterwards, I'm sure, but we have a number of tools who just came over the last 10-15 years. We had internet, now we all have a website, but now we have, in addition of the website and what we were using before, we have Twitter, we have Facebook, and that adds up. So we have to deal with a number of tools, but in addition, that changes the dynamics of communication. Now, for instance, we can just tweet something, and that will have an impact on journalists who will then come back to you to have more information. So that changes also the direction of communication, and that's something to be taken into account as a challenge. The institutional context is also a challenge. So that's the context of the problematic that I discussed here, but that's also the context of your own organization. I mean, as a TA organization or as a university research center, you're embedded into an institutional landscape, and you cannot allow yourself to say whatever you want, whenever you want. So you have to be careful and to find the appropriate way to deal with that context, which is also rapidly evolving, both for university research centers and for TA organizations. So that you need to know which line you don't want to cross. And then the translation process was highlighted. By translation process, we mean both that some translation has to occur within the organization, between the communication people and the project managers. So that relates to the story. Sometimes the project managers will just think that there is a hot topic there, a hot story, and then a communication officer would say, no, there is nothing to communicate about, not in this form at least, so we need to transform it a little bit. That's the first translation process. The second is when people in charge of communication would deal with the outside world. So then you need also to translate your results into a message that can be conveyed to your different target groups. So that's also part of the challenge. And that's it. Thank you.